Hi, my name's Lisa Mintz. I am the director of UrbaNature Education, and I'm also the founder of Sauvons la Falaise. So Sauvons la Falaise is a group that was successful in creating the 7th Grand Park on the island of Montreal from the Falaise Saint-Jacques. And UrbaNature is making this really cool video which is talking about the history of the Falaise, because there's a really long history and we have a lot of memory holders here in NDG, and to get this all put down and remembered is really important. So what we have here is the intergenerational audiovisual history of the Falaise. Young people working with older people to create a history of the Falaise. It's turned out really well and we've been really happy, and I hope you enjoy it.
Tell us your name and a little bit about yourself.
Colin Lewis. I've lived in Montreal all my life. I was a banker. I went to school in Montreal West High School, then went to Sir George Holmes University, now Concordia. And I've lived here all my life, and I'm interested to hear your questions. I hope I can answer them.
Hi, I'm Eddie Dab, and I've been working along Lisa Mintz to expose the Falaise Saint-Jacques to our population and communities. I'm here this morning with this lovely crew of ladies who are going to record my activities concerning the Falaise Saint-Jacques.
And how did you discover the Falaise Saint-Jacques?
I didn't. It was plain and simple. I knew there was an escarpment here, but at that time, I grew up in the 50s in NDG. You couldn't get from Sherbrooke Street down to Upper Lachine Road unless you went through Montreal West or you went through Westmount. There was no way to get to this part of NDG. So we knew it was here, but we stopped tracks because parents said, you don't go beyond the tracks.
I lived in NDG for about 35 years. So when my children were small and we lived on Belgrave, we would walk along the tracks on de Maisonneuve, and every once in a while we'd encounter this woodsy area and always wondered, oh, what's going on down there? And we noticed garbage. I remember noticing huge fridges, stoves, many tires. In the summertime, sometimes we try to go over the fence and go in, but it was too much brush and there was really nowhere to walk. I think my children were very excited about the leaves. They were raised in the country until they were 5 and 6, and so they were very familiar with trees, etc. So they were curious, but we really didn't go in because there were no clear paths.
So when you did discover the trail and started, what was your reaction to
Well,
what you saw?
I never discovered the trail. I knew that the city was trying to do something about it, and I knew that this was I call it a midnight dumping ground. So people were dumping all sorts of garbage, tires, everything, and it was a mess. And you could see it when you drove along the 20, how bad it was. So it was great to hear that they were going to do something about it and take this green space and link it up to the Lachine Canal, so you could bicycle paths and a park running right the way over, which is, we're not quite there yet.
My name is Gilles Vincent. I'm a botanist. I did my degree at University of Montreal in plant ecology. I did all my career in botanical garden community. So I started my career at the Montreal Botanical Garden as a scientist, botanist, then I became a director of the garden for 14 years. It was the last mandate of Jean Drapeau, and as you know, Jean Drapeau wanted the city to be international. So we had the exhibition in 1967, the Olympic. And each time Jean Drapeau need to receive VIPs from different countries, he went himself to the airport, Dorval Airport, and come back, and he saw this dump, and it was really a shame. He said, it's terrible. The first thing that our visitors see from Montreal is this dump. And me, I was born and raised in Lachine, which is about 5 kilometers west of it, and again, I saw this and I said, I was a kid at that time. I said, that's terrible. And then Jean Drapeau asked Mayor Bourque, he was director of the Montreal Botanical Garden at that time. He said, we need to do something with the Falaise. It's terrible. And this is why we say, okay, we need to plant some trees here. But it wasn't easy because you can imagine, no organic matter. It's a dump, it's a construction debris and everything. And this is why it started. And this started in beginning of the 80s.
My name is Sam Bosky. I was a city councillor for the Carrie district in Notre-Dame-de-Grâce from 1982 to 1998. The city administration, the outgoing administration, Jean Drapeau at the time, made the development of the Falaise one of their election promises for the West End. And I was running against Drapeau's party at the time, but the Falaise seemed like a very interesting idea. The idea that they came up with at the time was a plan not all of which was ever put into effect, but would be to stabilize the cliff because a lot of it wasn't safe for walking, put a linear park along the top of the cliff below Saint Jacques so that one would be able to walk around the whole top. And that got started with what is known as Terry Fox Park now at the eastern end of the Falaise. And the idea was to make the Falaise accessible for cross-country skiing, for bicycling, and for various other kinds of recreation. And the role that I ended up playing at council was trying to make sure that the city went ahead with this. Every time the budget came out, if there wasn't money in the budget for the Falaise, I would raise the issue and would draw the attention of journalists to it and try and make people in the neighborhood aware of the fact that there was this project on the books, but that it seemed to be moving very, very slowly. The head of the city's parks department, or the botanical gardens at the time, Pierre Bourque, who later became mayor of Montreal, was a botanist who, in his research up in the James Bay area, had discovered various kinds of highly resistant plants, some of which he thought would be very useful for planting on the side of the Falaise in large numbers. They required very little maintenance, and yet they would develop roots and stabilize the land. So there was a procedure over a few years of a lot of planting. At the same time, there was an attempt by the city to try to clean up the Falaise, to remove the old automobile tires and refrigerators and dead cars and all sorts of junk which had been dumped over, and to maintain a certain watch over this to make sure that this didn't fill up again.
We had a lot of things to do. First, it was important to be sure that the plants can grow in that type of habitat. And at that time, we didn't really talk about biodiversity. But our feeling says if we use different species, maple species, willows, linden, many species, finally maybe some of them will be able to grow and colonize this thing. So that was our idea. And the very, very unique thing we did at that time is we used mycorrhiza, which is the fungus. Now we know everything about that trees are connected with fungus. It's a big symbiotic thing. In 1980s, it was one scientist in our garden who worked on that, and he said, this is the future. So we decided to inoculate all the trees with mycorrhiza, which was probably the best thing that we did at that time. So for me, the best example of slope regeneration, renaturalization. It was, considering the beginning of the Falaise, how it is today, it's amazing. It's the best example, and I still teach. And you want to know a good example of soil rehabilitation, go to the Falaise.
My name is Jason Prince. I'm an urban planner. I worked for 5 years in action research at McGill School of Urban Planning from 2008 to 2013. I got hired. I kind of worked on trying to develop the research project that became the 5-year research action project at McGill School of Urban Planning, to try and figure out how do we optimize the arrival of this mega hospital for the surrounding neighborhoods. And shortly after, we took in the Turcotte interchange project, which was just a few feet away. So we looked at these two mega projects and we tried to figure out, how to make them work for the benefit of the surrounding neighborhoods from an urban planning point of view, principally. The Turcotte project was a project of the Minister of Transportation in Quebec. It was a reconstruction project of two highways that distribute cars in 4 different directions in the Montreal region. It's about 10 minutes walk from downtown Montreal, about 200 feet from the new mega hospital. It was at the time one of the biggest public infrastructures projects in North America, certainly the biggest in Canada. I think the final cost was about $3.5 billion.
So if you could just introduce yourself, please.
Sure. My name is Campbell Stewart. I'm the former mayor of Montreal West. I've worked with a lot of environmental organizations over the years. When they were rebuilding the Turcotte and making the plans for it, as one of the neighboring municipalities, we were invited to consult with the City of Montreal and with the Ministry of Transport on how it was going to be done. And at the time, it was very clear there were a lot of issues. One of the most important, certainly for me and for a lot of people with an environmental conscience, was not to build the expressway too close to the bottom of the Falaise. When I made the request from the City of Montreal that they changed their plans to widen the area at the bottom of the Falaise, we were assured that the reason for it was because the Ministry of Transport insisted on it. A few months later, when I asked the Ministry of Transport in a presentation why they were doing this, they said they didn't care. It was the City of Montreal that insisted on it. And this was a very typical interaction with the Tremblay administration, the mayor of Montreal at the time. So that was my first encounter really with the City of Montreal and the Falaise.
Obvious to anybody was that moving the highway infrastructure right up against the Falaise would kill all the potential for making that into a green space. It would probably make it impossible for the migrating birds to successfully nest there. It was a disaster from a planning point of view, and a green space at risk. So the Turcotte interchange is at the bottom of the Décarie Expressway as it pours out into the southwest, and it's at the intersection of in the east-west corridor of the Highway 20. So it brings cars from the West Island into downtown Montreal every day, in, out, 75, 100,000 cars moving into the center, going out. And as you're coming into the city from the airport, on the left-hand side, you have this beautiful green space. It's a linear green space that separates, really, it's the Falaise in the sense that it's about 100-foot drop from what's the upper city of Montreal and the lower city of Montreal, the defining feature, really, geographical feature of this island. And back in the 1960s, the planners at the time sacrificed that beautiful natural feature in Montreal to highway infrastructure, despite great opposition. At extreme cost, they tore down thousands and thousands of housing units and ripped a hole in the middle, down the center of Montreal. So the reconstruction project was to, in fact, replace that. And at that moment, in 2008, 2009, we should have known better. And what we've done is a real disaster that will continue to feed disaster in the city of Montreal. We had to figure out how to fight the Minister of Transportation on this stupid project. And so we put out a book. It was very quickly put together, and it came out about 3 days before the public hearings were conducted on the project. Quebec government's laws require public consultations, so they put together a BAP, Bureau d'Audience Publique. And so in the drum roll leading up to that public consultation, we tried to optimize the information that citizens would have in order to conduct themselves appropriately during that consultation. So the book is kind of that. It's designed to inform and help us navigate the questions that we were going to be asking in that public consultation.
And were you part of the Bureau des Audiences Publiques for the Turcotte reconstruction?
Well, I made some presentations to it. I mean, I was certainly involved as the mayor of Montreal West, for sure. Yes. And we really did want to make sure that whatever was built made sense from an environmental perspective, put the environment first.
The BAP came out with a report about a year after their hearings were finished, and I gave it a note of B minus on about maybe 10 different criterion. But many of the environmental organizations in Montreal supported the project because it proposed a few watery concessions to public transit and principally some real benefits vis-a-vis the Falaise. So the distance between the highway and the Falaise was reasonable, allowing for wastewater but also creating a potential for a park there. And in the sales images there was this parc d'Al, front page of Le Devoir, a beautiful picture of this pedestrian and animal crossway that would lead animals and people from the Falaise to the Lachine Canal. So this was the centerpiece of the greenwash that the Minister of Transportation conducted on the civil society at that moment. And some of the green organizations supported it. So, but in terms of transportation, it was a disaster. Yeah.
First, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Al-Ubaidi. I am the director of the NDG Community Council. At that time, the mayor said it's a danger place, we should not walk, and nobody should do anything in it. So Peter McQueen wanted to prove to me that it isn't. And he took me in a walk. And it was really the first time I discovered there's something like that in NDG.
I'm Peter McQueen, City Councilor from NDG. I live right near the Falaise, and I've been using it regularly for well over a decade.
So how did you first discover the Falaise and what got you interested in protecting it?
Well, you know, it's here on the southern edge of NDG. It could be a beautiful park for people. And probably one of the first times I used it was when I was cross-country skiing in it. Like I say, a good 12 years ago, and that was before the paths down here were well cut. So there were a lot of trees down blocking the way. I used to have to take my skis on and off. But now, thanks to the volunteers from Sauvons la Falaise and so forth, the paths tend to be pretty clear, and now I can come down here and ski without having to take my skis on and off.
After my walk, he convinced me that it's an important thing for a space in NDG. It's the lung of NDG, so we decided, and usually we do different themes, and the environment, it will be one of the themes normally. So we decided to do the same thing, but with this time focusing on the Falaise Saint-Jacques. We worked with the Montreal West, so it was the Mid-Brook group. So how we wanted to talk about how it's a continuation from the Falaise in Montreal West going to NDG. We didn't go further, but the idea was to give the people the information about what is it, how should we protect it, what's happening on the top when people are throwing the garbage, and why is it important to NDG, despite the fact that many said it's not part of NDG. So there were two mayors. There were the Montreal West and NDG. There was a person who is from the Green organization, and he was the one who talked about the I remember the brown snakes and the different birds, and the even I remember they talked about the river, the old Saint-Pierre River that used to run in the Falaise, but it's gone. So all these issues were talked about, and we had about, I would say, more than 80 people. It was held in Saint-Raymond in the gym, and we continue. We didn't stop. We continue to participate in different meetings, but then we didn't have to because we had an activist who was also on the board of the council, and she took it as her mandate, Lisa. She was the one who took it, and we support her, but we didn't have to do anything anymore. She was the leader. They continued to discuss and try to bring the two groups together from Montreal West and NDG, and that's what I said. Lisa was the one who started her activism and started organizing events and walk, and then she created her own UrbaNature organization, and that's it. I don't have to do anything anymore. Lisa do everything.
Awesome. And what made you feel that the Falaise was important, and what does it mean to the NDG community?
It is really a natural place in our neighborhood. You don't have to go to Montreal, the Montreal, to walk in nature. You can do it here. And there was a lot of controversial kind of discussion between people, dangerous, not dangerous, protected, not protected. But when Lisa started organizing her tours and environmentalists came and people who understand nature and explained that you are not disturbing the nature, this is an excellent location. And it needs to be having guided tour, it needs to be protected, it has to be cleaned, and they do the cleaning. Somebody has to be responsible for it, but it's beautiful. Like it's really, it's a gift that was given to indigenous that they should protect.
Now, we had meetings for a long time, and Lisa and I and some other members would join us. We would go to city council meetings and harp and really bother them. Under Sue Montgomery, she actually listened, the ex-mayor of NDG, and she did support us a lot to try to get the Falaise noticed at the city level. But after 2 years of going and asking questions and repeating ourselves, I think we finally got noticed. I remember going to city council, and again, here I am, and the mayor said, "Oh yes, Miss Dab, hello, how are you?" Well, obviously she had maybe up to here with me, but I wasn't quitting. And we decided one Christmas party meeting, and Roger brought up, sorry, I'm going to divert for 2 seconds. Roger, Malcolm, and John, is his husband, started clearing up, doing some clearing up so that we could actually walk into the Falaise more and more to the east. And so at this next meeting, they hadn't done much yet. We realized that nothing was moving with the Falaise. And we also realized that if we waited for the city to come and clear up and start putting paths in so we can enjoy it and walk in it, we could wait a very long time because that wasn't a priority. We were changing governments at the Quebec level. I don't think that François Legault is that interested in green spaces in Montreal. Not really. We already know that. And so Roger actually brought up, he said, well, I have an idea. Let's do this. Let's make the Falaise our own. And then we started this kind of off-group called Making the Falaise Our Own. And what it entails is these guys had a bunch of tools, not electric tools, saws, axes, and 3 or 4 of them would go down into the Falaise a few days at a time during spring and summer and start chopping woods. They started carving a path. We decided not to tell anybody that we were doing this because we were afraid that it would make things worse, so we started doing it. And no one bothered us. And before we knew it, we had a path to the east. Now I believe it goes all the way to Décarie. And now we've started a path to the west, which I find more interesting because it's an irregular path. So you still have rocks and you can still feel like you're in the woods. The path to the east is secure, where I can bring seniors, we can bring young children. But now the path to the west is very exciting. And I love going to the west because it's a challenge. I can go up and down and it's clearly marked. There's no way you can get lost.
And what has happened in the last 10 years is that the community organizations, particularly led by Lisa Mintz, among other people, citizens have mobilized and have colonized the Falaise. And if you wanted a recipe for success for other groups that are trying to defend green spaces in Montreal, that are going in the direction of public parks, this is the magic. This is the secret sauce. You've got to mobilize people, get into the green space and use it and make it your own. Like citizens, the citizen mobilization that has happened in the past few years is spectacular. And it really, I think, is it shows then what the potential of this park could be. You know, when now that it's finished, and if the Parc d'Al is constructed, this huge green space will actually service probably 100,000 residents in the city of Montreal, walking, reasonable walking distance to it. So it's a major green space. It's a contribution of a major green space to Montreal's urban fabric.
It's close to a miracle that it's been preserved as it has been. Sauvons la Falaise is an organization who's done an extraordinarily effective work, both politically and physically, cleaning the place up and making it hospitable for people. Hopefully, they'll respect it and keep their dogs on a leash, but we live with the world we have, and in the real world, this is a tremendous asset for the city, and kudos to the citizens who have made this happen.
Well, we need green space. We really need green space, and the Falaise, it's a fantastic green space. And if you open it officially, more people will come. I'm not sure that there's a lot of green space around except this. Again, you know, we don't talk, at that time in the 80s, we didn't talk about carbon dioxide sequestration, climate change, and everything. Can you imagine here how carbon is sequestration in the trees? If we open it, people will use it, of course. It's very easy to reach. For me, it doesn't take much thing to do. You can see that there's some part need to be clean, and for me, the best way to protect the Falaise is to open it officially and take care of it.
And one thing I can do, for instance, some resident of NDG set up a system of ropes and pulleys near Terry Fox Park, so around Wilson, and that's near where I live. So I, in the winter, will go into the Falaise near there, use his ropes to rappel down the very steep side, walk along the path, which I also ski along, you know, through the middle of it, and then come out here and go shopping at the Loblaws, at the Provigo, and then walk home with my groceries on my back, you know, along Saint Jean. So, you know, it just makes that walking to, you know, get your groceries is a good idea, and being able to go through the Falaise just makes it that much more pleasant, fun, and interesting.
I think it should be promoted, and it's good for, you know, people's health. Get out in the air and walk, and it's good to have green space in the city. Can you imagine people driving into the city on Highway 20, you've never been in Montreal before, and they look up and they see this green space for 3 straight kilometers? It's really something.
Mm-hmm. Very pretty.
Yeah, especially at this time with the leaves all changing.
Give a message to our borough and our provincial and our federal. This is a beautiful place. Please help us in protecting it. Support this organization that's doing an excellent job, and we thank you in advance.